Peripheral Mission. Chapter 1. A brief introduction to how this mess started. In defense of the Dirty Cop's intelligence, they thought they were alone in the bodega when they started shaking down the owner. I'd needed to make an emergency late-night run for milk, pads, and ibuprofen, and the store was due to close in a few minutes. Everybody else had already cleared out. Lucky me. I was checking the milk jugs to find one with an expiration date at least a week out when I heard a chime from the bells over the door. Thinking it was another customer, I didn't pay much attention. I was more interested in the half-gallon of 2% I'd found with an expiration date 10 days away. The sound of a stranger growling, "Is anyone else in here?" startled me so badly I almost dropped the jug. If I had, this story would have ended very differently. Instead, Mr. Miller, the owner, had plausible deniability when he whimpered, "No, everyone's gone." He believed himself too. That sold it. How did he miss my presence when he saw me walk in less than 5 minutes earlier? Be patient. We'll get there. I put the jug down and slipped the belled bracelet I always wore off and into my pocket. It didn't chime. I had a lot of practice with controlling the sound. The bodega was shaped sort of like an elongated donut, with a central shelving unit smack bang in the center and products on all 4 walls. The little fridge-freezer section was in the opposite corner from the checkout, and the door was in the middle of the front wall. The door to the office was across from the checkout, and the door for supply drops was in the final corner. This left me without a clear line of sight to the confrontation and vice versa. It also meant I'd have to walk past the aggressors in clear view if I wanted to use any of the doors. Fortunately, this was less of a problem for me than it would have been for someone else. I heard a slap, followed by a choked groan. "Check," the stranger ordered. "Oh, great. There are multiple," I thought. I closed the fridge as quickly and quietly as I could and picked the milk back up. Just in time. The man who rounded the corner was giant, with a build that indicated practical strength instead of bodybuilder muscle. His squinty eyes and huge hands reminded me of a bear trying to imitate a human and doing a bad job of it. I was 5'6", 130 pounds, and seriously out of practice in regards to my Krav Maga training. Any fantasies I might have entertained of fighting off the intruders disappeared in a puff of smoke. Big guy checked the back room and didn't find anyone, then looked down the aisle at me. I held still. His eyes skipped right over me, and he turned to grunt, "Nobody." His jaw barely moved to form the word, which scraped around the edges like working its way past his teeth had damaged it. I put the milk down and scooted around the near end of the central shelves as soon as he walked away. If I was going to get out of here, I needed to see what I was up against. It didn't look good. 3 aggressors and Mr. Miller, all standing in front of the cash register. The ringleader, a man who looked like a gym coach but meaner, had a fist in Mr. Miller's collar and had him dragged halfway across the counter. Big guy was hovering behind ringleader's shoulder and cracking his knuckles. A third guy was leaning up against the front door, chewing on a cigarette. He looked over-tall and too thin, like a rubber hose figure that got stuck on stretch and forgot the squash. I was glad I'd already disregarded the front door as a means of egress. The belt over top of it would have given me away even without the meat shield blocking the exit. "You're 3 weeks late on paying up," ringleader snarled in Mr. Miller's face. "Payment? Oh, hell, this was a mob shakedown. Why couldn't it have been a nice, simple robbery? I don't have the money. I have to maintain my stock and eat, and I don't have any savings left. I can't afford the protection fee, too," Mr. Miller stammered. I could see the sweat dripping down his face from here. I wished I could have comforted him with the knowledge of my presence, but that wasn't how it worked. If he noticed me, we'd both be screwed. Ringleader didn't like that answer. He dragged Mr. Miller bodily over the counter, sending chocolate bars and chapstick tubes scattering across the ground. I flinched at the noise and pulled back behind the shelves to run down the aisle. I didn't want to see what was about to happen. My retreat didn't mean I couldn't hear the sound of merchandise scattering and the grunt of air being driven out of Mr. Miller's lungs. That was followed up by the sound of retching. My own stomach churned in sympathetic pain. "Just hold out a little longer," I thought at Mr. Miller. "Just a little longer and I'll be able to call the police." Ringleader kept talking. "If money's such a concern, you clearly need to learn how to plan a budget. Len, show Mr. Miller here what happens when people fail to prepare for emergencies." I made it to the back door and placed my hand on the handle. In that instant, the shelves I'd been using as cover tipped and fell. If I hadn't gotten past them already, I'd have been pinned. Glass shattered, screeching metal twisted, and a horrible cacophony luckily drowned out the gasp I muffled behind my hand. The shelves and back wall formed a lean-to structure which threatened to collapse at any second. Big guy, Len, had shoved the entire unit over. The effort had left him red-faced and grunting, but the fact that he'd managed to do so at all sent a clear message. A slowly growing, foul-smelling puddle of mixed liquids seeped towards my sneakers. I inched away. Squeaky shoes were the enemy. If not for the fact that I was a moment away from escape, I'd have taken them off. I glanced over to see Mr. Miller curled up in the fetal position on the ground. He was shaking, though I couldn't tell exactly why. Ringleader was looming over him, and Skinny had stepped away from the door to lean against the checkout counter. He held his cigarette out to Ringleader, who plucked it from his fingers and dropped it almost lazily onto Mr. Miller. The pointless cruelty earned him a flinch and a cry. That little action was too much. Enough was enough. I dropped to remove my shoes and looked around for anything I could use to disrupt the assault. My eyes landed on 3 objects in rapid succession. A gallon bottle of vegetable oil that had fallen off the central shelves, a box of lifesaver rolls, and a security camera blinking away above the cash register. The cameras were new, as far as I could tell. As for the candy and the oil, kid left in the house on Christmas wasn't the only person who could set up a booby trap. The laces of my sneakers knotted together kept the shoes around my neck. I had to work quickly. My training may have lapsed, but habits were a lot harder to break. In my case, habits included always having 2 lighters, a lock-picking set, a flash drive with multiple connectors, and a multi-tool with a knife on my person at all times. The oil bottle was easy to puncture with a little care, and there was plenty of space between Big Guy and the tipped shelves. I slipped past him and soon had a puddle spreading across the floor. When returning to my original position, I used the dregs of the oil to make a continuous trail leading behind the tipped shelves. I then rolled, flicked, slid, and dropped the lifesaver rolls into the main part of the puddle, flung the last tube at the office door, and ducked behind the impromptu lean-to, out of line of sight. I didn't necessarily have to, but better safe than sorry. The candy hit with a thunk. I popped my head back out as soon as the sound died. All eyes had turned in the direction of the noise. Ringleader jerked his head at the door, and Len tromped over with Skinny slithering behind him. He noticed the candy sticks. He was supposed to. I wasn't expecting him to slip on them. They were there to lull him into a false sense of security. What he didn't notice was the puddle of oil the sticks were sitting in. I was still touching that. It was a moment of beauty, something straight out of one of the best slapstick cartoons. One huge foot came down kicking candy away, then it slipped right out from under him. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and Len was ginormous. One flailing paw caught Skinny in the head. He went down too, and all 3 of the invaders started yelling. I took my hand out of the oil. They'd know something was up if they couldn't acknowledge the trap after they'd triggered it. None of them were paying attention to Mr. Miller. He made his break for it. By the time the goons had extricated their limbs and stopped sliding around, he was past me and out the back door. I let out a silent breath of relief. One less thing to worry about. Now to deal with the cameras. Ringleader was berating the goons, which gave me plenty of opportunity to sneak past them and approach the door to the office. Ringleader had moved another step away from the counter, so I could walk right behind him. Len and Skinny were standing side by side a few feet past the front door. Both were soaked in vegetable oil. I had to suck in my stomach and scoot past them sideways, and I was way too close to touching Skinny's elbow for comfort. Once I got past them, I had a straight shot to the office. Even while being careful not to cut my feet on the scattered glass or slip on my own booby trap, it wasn't too difficult. Remember that lock-picking set I mentioned earlier? The office door's lock was easy to trick, and a bit of the oil left on my hand rubbed over the hinges kept the door quiet as I slipped inside. The office was tiny and dark, with a desk and chair taking up the majority of the space. There was enough room for one person to sit behind the desk, one person to stand in front of the desk, and one person to walk around the desk if they squeezed in sideways. The wall was plastered with post-it notes, and the desk was covered with coffee cups, receipts, and a PC. My best bet for finding the security footage lay with the computer. I inched over as quickly as I dared and booted up the system. Fortunately, Mr. Miller was one of those types who only turned off their desktop at the end of the day. A wiggle of the mouse got the screen going, and the security cameras were connected to an app I found with a quick search. One plugged-in thumb drive and a few commands later, all footage from the past 10 minutes and counting was downloading. Ringleader's tirade finally died down, as did the apologetic murmurs from Skinny and Len. Please let them not notice the cameras, I prayed. I had 75% of the footage downloaded and needed another 30 seconds to a minute. I heard them notice Mr. Miller's absence. "Where'd he go?" Ringleader snarled, which boded well. "Find him!" he ordered, which did not. The download had stalled out at 85. If they checked the office now, I'd have to abandon the USB. While it might not spell the end of this little misadventure, I'd much prefer to have physical evidence when I took my story to the police. Skinny finally spoke loudly enough for me to hear. His voice was smooth and oily, silk dipped in old engine grease. Look, our missing friend has cameras set up. We can follow him with those. Of course he had a functioning brain and eyes. Why did I think this would be easy? A new security system? Ringleader clicked his tongue. Naughty, naughty. We'll have to deal with that, won't we? Daniel, go check the computer while Len handles the cameras. Shit! I still had 10% left to go. 5, 3, 2... The drive hit 100%, and I ejected it right as Daniel stepped into the office. He made a beeline for the computer. I couldn't get past him. The office was too small. I could either hide under the desk and pray he didn't sit down, or hop over the desk and make a break for it. I went over. The desktop had barely enough free space for one of my feet, and I hopped up as Daniel pulled out the chair I hadn't bothered with. We were inches away from contact. I was inches away from discovery. I had to get gone now. The attackers may not be able to see me, but I'd be on the cameras clear as day. As soon as Daniel checked the footage, they'd notified me. If they cornered me in the office, I'd be SOL. Landing silently was more muscle memory than anything, and I cleared the office and half of the main room before I heard a shout. Hey, there's someone else in this footage. Some woman's in the room with you right now. Fuck my life. I darted over to press myself into the blind spot by the front door I'd noticed while downloading the tapes. It wouldn't hold, but I might win a few seconds if Daniel and Ringleader had an argument about my existence. Are you high? Ringleader marched over to the office, skirting the oil puddle by sticking close to the fallen shelves. There's nowhere to hide. We checked. How in the hell would you walked right past her? Len was standing behind the counter. He hurled a jar at the camera over the register, shattering both. That kicked up another round of yelling from Daniel and Ringleader, who were trying to use the cameras to spot me. I took advantage of the new surveillance-free zone to dash past Len, who'd turned to yell at the other two, and sneak towards the back door. As I slipped through, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Ringleader shouted, "We'll put a bolo out for the bitch, then. One of the lieutenants can find some crime to pin on her. And even if that doesn't work, it's 3 officers of the law versus one random woman's word. Who'll believe her?" Oh, hell, I thought. They're cops. And they weren't the only ones in on this. Why couldn't this have been a nice, simple mob shakedown? The USB in my hand felt like it started to burn as I stepped into the back alley. Queries, kudos, or concerns? Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.